Dakota Johnson stars in a modernized adaptation of Jane Austen's final novel, Persuasion, which is currently streaming on Netflix. But is it worth a watch? Here's my review of Persuasion. Dakota Johnson and Cosmo Jarvis play star-crossed lovers Anne Elliot and Admiral Wentworth. Anne is the middle daughter of a snobbish, bankrupt baronet who derides her courtship with Wentworth, an untitled commoner, a rank below them, as it were. Anne's father, played by Richard E. Grant, persuades her to break it off with Wentworth and marry up, like her more pleasing, admirable sisters. She abides by her father's wishes and ends it with Wentworth. They're both crushed, but heartbroken, he runs off to join the Navy and spends the next 8 years moving up in the ranks and growing his wealth and improving his class status. Anne spends her 8 years lonely and longing for the love of her life, Wentworth. She's pressured to marry soon by her family. She's pressured to marry soon, but she's not interested in anyone else. Wentworth soon returns after 8 years of being in the Navy. He returns and is now a desirable suitor by many women, and seemingly no longer interested in Anne, which is what he conveys, that he is no longer interested in her. They both secretly love each other, but don't believe that they belong together. Anne finally decides to move on with her life and move on to the beautiful, highly ranked Mr. Elliot, played by Henry Golding. Though he asks for Anne's hand in marriage, he has a wandering eye and is stealing moments with another woman in town. In the end, though, Wentworth confesses his dying love to Anne in a letter that moves her to tears, and he wishes her well as he plans to re-enlist in the army. The letter gives her the perfect excuse to break it off with Mr. Elliot and flee the misery awaiting her if she married him. So she follows her heart and chases down Wentworth and finally commits to loving him forever. They embrace, and we're to believe that they will live happily ever after the end. This was a decent modern take on a Regency era courtship. I think Anne breaking the fourth wall with her vocal diary entries was risky, but creatively it worked because the script is well written. It was beautiful exposition that I think served scenes in a way that unpacked Anne's feelings. Let me explain. During the Regency era, women bottled up their feelings and weren't so vocal or expressive. It was uncommon during that era for a woman to pour out her heart. So Anne projecting to the camera the way they did it in plays, not women, but men would project in stage plays, and in that era, and I think Anne modernizing it by projecting to the camera worked for that reason. The dialogue was witty, which is also a credit to Ron Bass, one of the greatest screenwriters in the business, if you ask me, who shares a writing credit with Alice Victoria Winslow, which is her first feature film credit. I think the dialogue was very witty and very moving and comedic, and that aided in the effectiveness when Dakota Johnson breaks the fourth wall. So I think it was creatively brilliant to do it. The score oh my goodness, was very soothing from beginning to end, and it was romantic and ushered the story along without being overpowering and heavy-handed. It was also shot beautifully by director Carrie Cracknell and cinematographer Joe Anderson. They did a brilliant job. I thought this film was beautiful. And as the performances go, they were great, especially Mia McKenna-Bruce's multi-layered comedy relief. I loved her performance in this film. And Nikki Amuka Bird's motherly figure in a supporting role. Her performance guided the story, showing or reflecting what Anne's life would be outside of these societal norms that she's so accustomed to. I loved that arc, but I had issues. Mainly, Richard E. Grant and Henry Golding were so criminally unutilized, but they maximized their bite-sized roles. And the chemistry, oh my goodness, the chemistry between Dakota Johnson and Cosmo Jarvis was enigmatic. Neither they as actors nor their characters were conveying enough chemistry that they were madly in love. I never believed that they were madly in love. They only had chemistry in the opening scene, that very first scene. It was beautifully shot, and I believed that they were in love. But the rest of the film, it was sort of everything between them after that was bland. That's another reason her verbal diary entries or fourth wall that she breaks served the story. The dialogue helped to believe that it was possible that these two could be in love. I understand that this was a different time and the restrictions courtships were expected to maintain. So chemistry might have been different in those days. I get that. But they might as well have been acquaintances, because I didn't believe for a second that they were so in love that they abstained for 8 years until they met again. It wasn't compelling. And that hurt the pacing, because it takes a long time for them to reconnect even after they met again. It takes a long time for their love to really rekindle. If not for her exposition, we'd be rooting for her to marry her cousin, Mr. Elliot, or find someone else other than Wentworth. We needed to hear her say, she says, she has some beautiful lines, and we needed to hear her say them. She says, we're worse than enemies, we're exes, and we're worse than exes, we're friends. I felt that. So that fourth wall breaking worked. Dakota's performance keeps you engaged. Her British accent is delivered well, I believe. Her facial acting reels you in. Her comedic timing is pristine. This film doesn't work without Dakota Johnson's performance, in my opinion. And it doesn't feel soapy like Bridgerton. That's not shade. I love Bridgerton, but Bridgerton is centered around salacious gossip to move the story, and you don't get that in Persuasion. So it is not soapy. But if you like Bridgerton, or even some of the Jane Austen fan fiction, such as Sense and Sensibilities, Clueless, and even Bridget Jones' Diary, I think you will enjoy Persuasion. Persuasion is currently streaming on Netflix. On a grading scale, I give Persuasion a B. Have you watched Persuasion yet? It's #1 on Netflix, so it appears that everyone is dialing into it. Well, thank you so much. If you stuck around this long, I certainly appreciate you. Please consider liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. And until next time, peace.